Hi, my name is Benny Johnson. As some of you know, I've been struggling with addiction. However, I decided to change my life and went into recovery. I started this podcast 90 Days Clean, and I want to take you along in my journey. What does lie ahead of me? Let me be frank, I do not know. Will I ever drink again? I do not know. This is how Stairway to Redemption was born. It is my search for answer in a real-time process of what is going to work for me. It is then my aspiration to help you figure out what's going to work for you. It is our journey together. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Stairway to Redemption. This week, I have the honor, to host with the utmost respect since he's my sponsor. Not only that, but he leads a weekly big book study at a local meeting. After sharing his story, we're going to talk about spirituality and especially spiritual awakening and what it means to be spiritually fit. So guys, I give you Luis. Luis, so tell us your story. How did you end up to the rooms of AA, and also how did you end up leading a big book study? You can take as much time you want, like you can as many details you are comfortable with. So
Okay. Well, how did I get to the rooms? And I earned my seat. I was a broken human being. I was broken in every way possible, mind, body, and spirit. And I entered the rooms initially for the first time in what would have been June of '96. I didn't stay very long, but re-entered the rooms again in October of 1996, same year. At which point, at that point, when I came in, essentially I was broken in spirit to the point where I was just willing to do anything to get out of, the situation that my life had become, which was I used the term broken, but literally wasn't any aspect of my life that just wasn't a complete disaster, and I would add a disaster of my own making. I was very, very fortunate when I came in the second time around. It, is that I quickly met the person who was turned out to be my sponsor, and he was somebody who was grounded in the big book, and he didn't waste any time. We started working the program immediately, maybe within 2 months of me getting into the rooms is when I met him, maybe 4 to 6 weeks when I was in the rooms, and we got started immediately. And he took us through our program of recovery as outlined in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he started not even at the title page, he started at the blank page preceding the title page and took me through our program, literally page by page, line by line. And with his guidance, I was essentially establish a relationship with a power greater than myself, which was essentially the beginning, right? The beginning of my journey in recovery. Um, that was almost 28 years ago.
wow,
So a
impressive.
lot's so a lot's happened in 28 years. Many highs, many lows. How did I get to where the point where I facilitate big book experience meetings? Well, I grew up on that. I literally grew up on that. Um, the first big book experience meeting that I'm aware of that was in at the time what I would consider Queens, started in my sponsor's bookstore. He owned a recovery bookstore and he had several sponsees. And we used to come in on Wednesdays. It just was coincidentally, nobody coordinated this. We would meet in his bookstore on Wednesday nights. He'd sit behind the counter there smoking, and there were two or three of us, and we were always there, and we were always just talking. We were talking about recovery, talking about the program, and one day we just sort of looked at each other and we said, "Geez, why don't we make a meeting out of this?" And so we agreed to like, okay, next week, everybody try to bring at least one person.
Hmm.
And we started a big book experience meeting at we started a new AA group. It was called Steps by the Book. It was on Union Turnpike off 164th Street,
Mm-hmm.
Queens. And my sponsor took the first cycle. I mean, we were a very small group. It was just him taking us through the book. We had all of us, most of us had already either were currently working with him through the book or had already been taken through the book with him. And that was my early recovery. I was very, very fortunate in that respect because I hear so many stories about people who had been in the rooms maybe for quite a long time before they actually heard the real program of recovery. They may have been exposed to the culture of
Mm-hmm.
recovery, but not necessarily the program of recovery.
All right.
Um, in my case, I was very fortunate to basically meet this person, and so once that group started, it wasn't long before I was taking my own turns at facilitating. And although that group took many shapes and forms over the really almost 3 decades, the genesis of that group still exists today. It's called Circle of Life Group now in Hicksville. But like a little band of nomads, we did travel to other locations. The bookstore is not even there now. It's a shame if you drive past it, it's a nail salon. Um,
Oh man.
but but the program still exists, and
Yeah.
so um, and it's not just facilitating because I see facilitating as really just an extension of my experience of taking other men through our program. It was emphasized to me in the strongest terms at the very, very beginning how vital it was for my own recovery to carry this message to other people. And I have done my best to do that. And I'm a big believer in when I find somebody who's willing to go through our program, we just I take them through the book just the way I was. We start,
Mm-hmm.
we get a big book, we open up to that blank page, and that's where we start. And I mean, I don't have a counter or anything, but I've been very blessed in recovery. I would say I've worked with maybe 200 to 300 men over the past, not quite 28 years that I've been sober.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think of each of those experiences, the book is being revealed to me. What people miss out, one of the things that I feel people miss out on is, you see, when I take someone through the book,
Mm-hmm.
I'm having that experience all over again. You see,
Yeah.
I'm now once again, feeling the depth of that first step experience. I'm realizing, like how much more I have to double my spiritual efforts if I'm going to continue to grow. And, it's, essentially the book then begins to, at least from my experience, it comes alive, you see.
Oh wow.
Um,
Yeah.
I, I, I still have my original big book as a sort of more as a, memento.
Mm-hmm.
I had first time I got separated from drugs and alcohol was essentially after a 26-year run, and I went to a rehab in May of 1996. That was the first time in my certainly since I could remember that I had been separated for any period of time. And I went away to rehab, and one of the things they handed me was a soft covered big book. And somebody told me, "Oh, you should read this book. It's important, it's a big, Of course I knew nothing. I was totally, not only was I ignorant about recovery, I was ignorant about what the illness is, forget about
Yes.
recovery.
Mm-hmm.
But so of course, I picked up the big book. I skipped all the pages that that are in Roman numerals because obviously they can't be important. They don't even have numbers. And I went right to I,
Yeah.
I went right to Bill's story, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and at page one, chapter one, here we were, young new men, from Plattsburgh, feeling heroic, blah blah, etc. And I was like, what the hell is this crap? No, I don't think I said crap. And I shut that book, and I didn't open that book. That book was in pristine condition when I met my sponsor later that year, because later that same year in October of 1996, I had what I would call a vital spiritual experience and or a moment of clarity that instilled in me the willingness. And so when I came back in October of 96, I had a willingness that I'd never been able to bring about before. Anyway, to get to the point of the book,
Mm-hmm.
what's the point of my story? When you go through the book the first couple of times, maybe you sit through a few big book experience meetings. The typical thing is you're underlining, you're highlighting, you got things written in the margin. You've got all of this information that you've now, wow, this is great revelation and true or false. This is an instruction, that's a promise. And that book that is chewed up. I've got it, I'm looking at it now. It's on the bookshelf. It's got masking tape keeping it together, but they became a point in time when I realized when I was working with others and I'm using the book that it became stale to me. And the reason it became stale to me is that I was so bent on regurgitating, I'm probably mispronouncing that,
Yeah.
the same old, the same old stuff that I had written in my margins and this and that and so and forth, and so on,
Mm-hmm.
that it becomes stale. It was no longer real. It was just something I was spitting out.
Mm-hmm.
And it occurred to me that I should put that book on the shelf and just start with a blank book. And now
Ah.
you see, it's been maybe 20 something years now.
Mm-hmm.
If you notice, when we show up at the meeting you and I met, I don't bring a book.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not because
You usually do use whatever book is there. Like, yeah, I noticed that.
That's right. And
Mm-hmm.
it and I know, when you see a person walk in with a big book with notes and dog-eared dog-eared pages, that's a person who's really working their big book. And I respect that. And I'm not trying to,
Yeah.
negate that. But for me, when I'm facilitating, when I'm reading with another fellow traveler, by that book being completely blank, it becomes alive because now I'm being guided of the spirit of the book.
Mm.
And over the years, listen, when you're in front of a room and depending on the format, you have a half hour or an hour to basically go through the book and share experience and insights and so forth. A lot of that is just very kinetic to me. A lot is inspired just in that moment, in that breath. A lot is inspired by the people in the room who add their own insight and interjections and experience that then open brand new doors that I'd never even traveled on, new paths that I've never been on before when it comes to our program, to our literature. And so the book comes very much alive to me, which is a blessing. It can also be sometimes it's boomeranged on me because if you open your mouth enough, you're gonna say something stupid. So the, the side point is that I've been known to say things that maybe that wasn't the best thing you could have said in the
Oh
book.
boy.
Um,
Yeah, we're gonna come back to it later, but finish up. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, no, that's really the point. But so you asked the question how I got in and how do I get to where I'm facilitating. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the journey with my
Mm-hmm.
experience with the book. I'll make one last point. To
Yep.
me, it sounds like a contradiction as far as the book is concerned. We need to be grounded in the literature of our program.
Yes.
Without that maintains the integrity of the program.
Mm-hmm.
That also, more importantly, gives us a fundamental basis to communicate.
Mhm.
We need a language to communicate because essentially it, but we have to transcend the book.
Mhm.
And so although I'm grounded in the literature, I'm not held to the word in that respect, you see. And we need to transcend the book. It's the spirit of the book that's
Mhm.
vitally important because each journey that every person's on in our program is really an individual journey. I know this says we, but in my view, this is all about you as an individual entering upon a relationship with a power greater than yourself, and then growing in that relationship. And that itself it is when we think about that, there are really even no words that one can put to that type of relationship to define it and to explain it. And there has to be that freedom, that dynamism that exists, so that you that spirit can fill your heart, your soul, whatever
Mhm.
metaphor you want to use to inspire you as you journey along the path. If we're held to the word, the word, and you hear this phrase, the book says.
Yeah, the big
I'm
book
saying that.
thumper, like they call them.
Well, I don't, I know I'm saying it in a mocking term.
Yeah.
It's because I'm not trying to mock anyone. What I'm really trying to do is highlight the point
Mhm.
is that we can't be held to the word itself because
Mhm.
that's rigid. That's just that. Then that puts a structure of a hard fixed structure around the experience. And that's like saying, I'm going to put a hard fixed structure around the power of God. And that's
Yeah,
not possible.
I agree.
So, when I'm in front of the room, I have no idea what I'm going to say from one moment to the next, quite frank.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's how, that's kind of my journey with our program.
Mhm.
The journey getting to that point is different, of course. Um, and I don't know if you still want to I could talk a little bit about that. Um,
I mean,
because
like
for
we
me,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, for me, this is very much a spiritual journey.
Mhm.
And I didn't walk into AA, let's face it. I did not walk down into the rooms because I was interested in getting on a spiritual journey. Let's make that very clear. That was
Yes.
not my intention.
Mhm.
Um, but what's been revealed to me is that I had been on a spiritual journey all along, you
Oh,
see.
yes.
And and my problem, as Silkworth points out, for my spiritual malady of restlessness, irritability, discontentedness, right? My solution to those things was the drug, the drink, the sex, um, anything that was outside of me that gave me even a nanosecond of wholeness to
Mhm.
fill that void that I was living with within my soul. I took that as comfort, and of course, obviously, over time, that boomerang me, not only almost destroyed me as an individual, as a person on this planet, but really, it was also destroying everybody I cared and loved, that was anywhere within 50 square miles of me.
Yeah.
So, so to me, how I got to where I went into the rooms in October, I
Mhm.
I used the phrase that person that used to exist literally died because I mentioned in May of '96 that I was separated for the first time. And, listen, you get separated, you put on a few pounds, you take a few showers, you catch up on a heck of a lot of sleep, right?
Yes.
And then what do? They, put on some fresh clothes, they pat you on the back, and they give you a big book that you totally don't have any understanding what it means, and they tell you go out and make a meeting. And that's
Yeah.
what I did, like
Mhm.
everybody else. And you
Mhm.
know what? And although physically and mentally I might have been at the bottom of the bottom,
Mhm.
spiritually I had not been defeated yet because when I came into the rooms initially, I was picking and choosing what parts of the program I was going to see. I wasn't practicing the program, I was practicing my program. And my program was totally different because I was ignorant of the nature of the illness. I thought this was something that I just needed to make some adjustments in my life to get this thing under control, not realizing that, of course, there's no such thing as
Mm.
control, right? That's another delusion I lived with.
Yeah.
But I was picking and choosing, and I say how I met my sponsor after I came in October. I'm sure in the meetings I sat in that there were plenty of people carrying a message of death and weight, that
Mhm.
there were plenty of people talking about the solution, but I didn't hear them because I was too full. I was not listening. See, and I don't find it a coincidence that, and so when I went out, well, I was bouncing in and out, but when I went out in late August of '96, um, I was on a death run,
Oh, okay.
and it was literally the blackest time of my life, and I was trying to kill myself in a cowardly way,
Yeah.
You see. I was just going to drink and drug myself to oblivion, you see. And I that and every day, because there were days that I would go without sleep and eating, and every day I saw the sun come up. It was not a blessing to see a sunrise. It was a curse that, oh God, I've got to go through another day of this. I've got to endure another day of this existence. It's not even living.
Mm.
Um, and what I tell people is that, yeah, I was out to kill myself, and guess what? I succeeded. I succeeded because the person that existed died. I nothing. There was nothing different about the day my sobriety started, or my recovery started, because I
Mhm.
wasn't sober yet, so I didn't have the tools. There's nothing different about that day than the countless days that went on before. I didn't wake up that day and say, I'm going to choose to stop, or this time I really want to stop, or this
Oh.
time I know what the consequences are. Okay, I could do the math. This is illogical. No rational human being would behave like this. It's time to stop. No,
Mhm.
that was not how I came to this. It wasn't anything I had learned. There was nothing that I now knew about myself that told me, hey, maybe it's a good idea to stop. I had been wanting to stop. I've been literally using against my will for 2 years,
Yes.
frankly, up to that point, except for the brief time that I went to rehab. And here's the thing: that day, my sober day was no different than any other day. There was nothing within myself, about myself, that I brought about that made the change. I truly believe in my heart of hearts that that was divine intervention. And to cut a very long story short, I had
Mhm.
passed out, of course, because we don't really sleep. We pass out.
Mhm.
I had passed out. And in October, back in those days, well, I think now they turn the clocks in November, but back then they used to turn the clocks forward, back in October.
Mhm.
So it was much. So I woke up, the room was pitch black, it was dark outside, and I said out loud as I woke up, I said, geez, I feel like I just woke up from the dead.
Mhm.
And the instant those words came out of my mouth, I had the overwhelming presence, intuitive insight. Don't have the specific words to capture
Mhm.
that. In fact, I had woken up from the dead, and I did. I was married at the time. My wife at the time, she's deceased now. May she rest in peace. Um, you know, I used to lie to her. Of course, I lied. I'm a,
Yeah, I
I,
mean that's addicts 101. You lie. Come on.
Yeah, right. So I used to lie. I used to promise. I used to swear I was through. I promise this time it's different. I really mean it.
Mm.
I was resigned. I was resigned. to my reality. This is what I am. I did not come out, with, like feeling like, okay, I got this thing. I just, like I said, it was an insight. And the next day, which I consider my sober date, October 24th, 1996, it was a Thursday. Um, I went to work and, I didn't even come home. I went straight to a meeting from the job to a meeting. I went from work directly to a meeting, and that's where my journey started. That's truly where my journey started. So you asked me how I got here and how I got to the point where I'm in front of a room, maybe sharing my experience. It's you know I earned my entry fee by just being broken in mind, body, and spirit.
Oh man, I have so many questions. Thanks for telling me your story, Luis. But I want to circle back to what you said. When people say, "I decided to stop drinking," I wanted to stop drinking, and you often make the distinction between wanting and being willing to go to any length to get sober. Could you expand on that?
I'm sure. So the first basics foundation
Mm-hmm.
to that, um, it, which is what I embrace, is the idea that lack of power is my dilemma.
Yes.
At the root is the lack of power is my dilemma, and I find that to be, if that was one side of the coin, the other side of the coin is there is one who has all power.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the but if we focus on lack of power, me being my dilemma, and we look at the real definition of the alcoholic or addict as described in our literature, by definition, the alcoholic is beyond human aid. And so, therefore, if that means that the ability for me to stop based on my own willpower or my decision or my desire, that if am an alcoholic of the hopeless variety as described in our book, then I don't have that ability.
Mm-hmm.
My reality is that I had the greatest desire to stop that I could muster. Every fiber of my being wanted, and I'll put that in quotation marks, wanted to stop. But that desire or want to stop was not sufficient to bring about the needed change. Why? At a fundamental level, why? Because I was beyond human aid. Same thing goes with any decision I would have made. If I made a choice not to drink or drug that day, it was,
Mm-hmm.
even if I was successful in doing that for a day or whatever it would be, I was still obsessed with the thought of drinking or drugging because I was thinking then about how not to drink or drug. So the thought of the drink or the drug never left me. And it would only be a matter of time where I would give into the thought
Mm-hmm.
and I would drink again. Because I had already lost the power of choice as to whether or not I would stop or not on my own. Why? Back to our fundamental premise. I was beyond human aid. Lack of power is my dilemma, not
Mm-hmm.
lack of knowledge, not lack of desire, not lack of awareness of the consequences. You
Mm-hmm.
see, all of those things. Now, how do I differentiate that from willingness? Well,
Yes.
there is a big difference, because a willingness to go to any length has nothing to do with my desire,
Okay. Interesting.
right? Right? Because it's a desperation, right? Our literature talks about,
Mm-hmm.
the desperation of drowning men. Yeah, you want to survive. I get it. Nobody wants to die. But that desire to live is not sufficient. But
Hmm.
a willingness to go to any length, that's to me, there's a big distinction between that and a desire to stop. Because if I rest my
Mm-hmm.
premise on the foundation that my desire to stop or my decision to stop, like
Mm-hmm.
this, you hear this all the time. I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's a common
Yes.
expression. As
Mm-hmm.
if being sick and tired was sufficient for me to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired easily a decade plus before I got sober.
Yeah.
You see, um, if I rest my premise, I'm building it on sand because then what I am saying in that point,
Mm-hmm.
that my recovery came about from myself, from my own will. And now I've taken it back from me being beyond human aid to not being beyond human aid because I'm human. So
Mm-hmm.
now the alcoholic, or we can't use that term. Let's use the other term. The hard drinker or heavy user
Mm-hmm.
who does stop because they want to stop, or they make a choice, or they have some crises or opportunity in life that presents themselves that gives them sufficient reason to stop. By definition, that person is not an alcoholic. Now, they're welcome as part of AA. Our traditions state their only requirement is a desire to stop drinking, right? So
Yes.
so they, so they're welcome. There's no requirement that says you have to be an alcoholic to be a member of AA. Now
Mm-hmm.
that sounds like a contradiction, but that's the reality,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, and when I point out to people that your desire to stop will get you a seat in AA, it won't get you to stop. There's
Mm-hmm.
a caveat to that. The caveat is that, presuming, of course, that you're an alcoholic of the hopeless variety, presuming, of course, that you're one of those who is beyond human aid. And
Mm-hmm.
and that leads to another point. That's why it's critically important for every newcomer that enters into the rooms to give themselves an opportunity to find out their own truth. Because just because I was beyond human aid doesn't mean you're beyond human aid.
Yeah.
And you owe it to yourself. The
Mm-hmm.
the challenge is that, like my own experience coming in, I thought I knew what I needed to know because I knew that I could do this and I'll do that and I'll manage and I'm still in the driver's seat, so I think,
Mm-hmm.
right? And because why? Mainly because I was ignorant of the nature of the illness. You see, I thought I was suffering from a moral issue. I thought my the root of my problems was that, I just wasn't man enough to do the right thing, right? That I
Yes.
had I had a character deficiency that prevented me from behaving in an
Mm-hmm.
upright moral way. You see, the truth is nothing could be further than the truth if you're one of us, if you're an
Mm-hmm.
addict beyond human aid, then it's, yeah, I may have moral issues and character deficiencies galore, right? I have a mountain of them. But that is at the root is not why I can't stop drinking or drugging. I can't stop drinking or drugging because I'm suffering from an illness.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so this is kind of a long walk around the block, but getting back to the original question, you
Mm-hmm.
know, how do I make that distinction? You know, I think the book makes the distinction for us. If we look at the literature, it's right there in black and white. The most powerful desire to stop drinking is absolutely no avail.
Yes.
Self knowledge is not a solution. We've
Mm-hmm.
lost the power of choice. For those of us who want to keep it green and remember the last run and some, crazy idea that will keep you sober because you never want to go back there again. And I know I'm saying it in a mocking tone, only to illustrate the point. Really, the reality is that if you read our own literature, if you're one of us, that,
Mm-hmm.
I cannot bring forward with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation
I know.
of a, you see, right? I share one experience.
Go ahead.
So I was I I was in the shower, I was getting ready to go to work, and I was one of these people that, you know, I worked my whole life, and although I lost jobs here and there because of my addiction, I always
Mm-hmm.
managed to stay employed. And so I was getting ready to work. Now, it didn't mean I got any sleep. So I was in the shower and I started convulsing in the shower to the point where I was now on the bed of the shower, literally convulsing. And I did a foxhole prayer. You know, we all been there. Oh, dear God, please, anything. Don't let me die in the shower. You
Yeah.
know, I swear I'm through, right? That same day, because my MO used to be that I'd go to work around 11ish, I would page Flacco,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would meet Flacco during lunch hour at a predetermined location. And then I would cop, and then I would start using, and that's what kept me going because I would normally not sleep. And then
Mm-hmm.
that would start the run for the next 24 hours because then about midday that day, I would be getting high. I would get
Mm-hmm.
high throughout the night. And then next thing you know, the sun would be up and I do this all over again. Well, here I
Yeah.
was, not days, not weeks later. I mean, I literally was shaking uncontrollably in the daggone shower. I thought I was going to die right then and there.
Yeah.
That same day, it was not days, it was hours later. Not only did I page Flacco, get in my car, drive to the predetermined location, exchange the monies for the goods. I was on
Yeah.
my second or third blast before I realized, holy smoke, was that this just this morning I swore I never was gonna do this again? It had not even come to mind. I had completely forgotten. That
Yeah.
just that hours ago, I thought I was gonna die in my bathtub.
That's
So,
crazy.
so I could choose all I want. I could desire all I want. I could try to keep it green and remember the last time and
Mm-hmm.
play the tape through. For me, those things were doomed. Those were doomed to failure. Well, I would call them relapse prevention techniques were doomed to
Yes.
failure. Um,
Yeah.
so
Go ahead.
well, when I work with people and when I have the privilege of sharing my experience in
Mm-hmm.
a big book experience meeting, and we get to these critical chapters, and there's a solution more about alcoholism, even in Bill's story, and of course, um, the doctor's opinion. I really try to drive these points home purposely to shake the ground under people's feet because for all of us, just keeping it to myself, there's a sense of certainty because now I know. You see, I, you know, and I will convince myself that, somehow I had something to do with my recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to be persuaded that way because, of course, our program of action has plenty of instructions in it. And then
Yeah.
we interpret that, oh, as long as I do these things, therefore I will remain sober. And there is a lot of truth to that. And I'm splitting hairs. But I would say ultimately, all of those things, quote unquote, these tools, all
Mm-hmm.
of those things, it's not a checklist. It is, those are tools that help us grow in our relationship with the power that solves the problem.
Yeah.
It's the
I
power that solves the problem. Those quote unquote things on the checklist or tools are, to me, they're tools that we've all agreed on that allows us not only to get in touch with the power, but to grow in that relationship.
yeah. Like oh man, you touch on so many topics right there, and also like the way you expanded it. But to resume what you just said, like, the way I understood it, it's not because we have some agency that we have control. And understanding that we have no control is basically how our best way of staying sober, right?
Yes. One pet way that I phrase it, I
Mm-hmm.
get back to lack of power is my dilemma. I think that's one of the great meditations. in the book. Um, but to embrace that, to clothe myself, in that, you see. And I'm not spouting any religion, but there's something out of the New Testament. St. Paul writes, where he talks about my power is sufficient for you.
Yeah.
You see, it's to embrace my imperfection, to embrace my lack of power.
Mm-hmm.
That I think creates then the inverse, where now we can become open, right, to be empowered. I'm stripped down to nothing, and then that allows me to be empowered.
So
You
it's a
see.
kind of leap of faith, basically, right?
Oh, it's very much a leap of faith.
Yeah.
At least in my view, I think when we get into we agnostics, and
Mm-hmm.
I always say that the steps are one thing. It's one experience, and it's hard for us because we're linear, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have them listed 1 through 12. It's
Yeah.
easy to think of them as 12 separate things, like like a loaf of bread that you slice, but it's really one experience. And a lot of this becomes it's so interconnected and interwoven,
Mm-hmm.
um, that but in we it's in we agnostics. First of all, we have, so if we could just say, for the sake of this discussion, because I don't know how much time we have, that
Yeah.
lack of power is your dilemma. Let's take
Yeah.
that as a given. The book is, if you read that chapter, is very interesting, because then you turn the page, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it starts laying out all these beautiful promises that as soon as we can lay aside prejudice, we will begin to be, sense, power and direction. As if you can be willing to believe, you found that you have, that's enough to begin the journey, right?
Yeah.
And that's summed up. It kind of repeats itself for a couple of paragraphs there. And, but in each of those paragraphs, there's a little dig. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Forgive me.
Yeah.
No, no, I want to be specific. So, and what do I mean? This is getting to your point of faith.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you look on page 46, like it says, yeah, we have agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experience. Let us, as soon as you're willing, so forth and so on, no, you're going to get results. But then it says what? Even though it's impossible for any of us to
Mm-hmm.
fully define or comprehend that power. Right there, they're telling us we can't define this thing. In fact, we can't even comprehend it. And when you think about it, just in a simplistic way,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a finite human being, and then you have the infinite.
Yes.
How am I, as a finite being, to understand, comprehend, or define? Once you define it, once you think you've defined it, because you can't,
Yes.
what you've done is you've put a limit around your concept of the power has now become limited by your own definition, which by definition, not to use the same word twice, is your preconceived notion or prejudice. Then what else does it say? Then further
Mm-hmm.
on, it says, the next paragraph says, much to our relief, we discover we need not consider another's conception of God,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's beautiful. Our own conception, wonderful, man. You always wanted to be on your own. There you go. You have it. Freedom, your own conception. Your what's it say next? However inadequate, by definition, my conception of a power greater than myself is inadequate. By definition, I cannot fully define or comprehend that power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Later on, the very next paragraph, they give us some more encouragement. But how do they end it? It's like a little dig. It's a little dig right
Yeah.
there. So we use our own conception, however what limited it
Did.
was. You see, so that means, if all that's true, if we take that as true, then
Mm-hmm.
that means I will never, I cannot sit down with a slide rule. Excuse me, I'm dating myself. We don't use slide rules anymore. but I can't sit down and do calculus and
Yeah.
figure out and then come to a logical conclusion in terms of
Mm-hmm.
how how you can measure a straight line from points A to B. Okay, that power, right? And
Yeah.
so there's always going to be the I don't know.
All right,
And
that's amazing. So, like, what then is a spiritual awakening at the following of the steps? Especially, like, how do you know that you reach that spiritual awakening if you cannot even put a definition on the understanding of that power?
that's a great question. Um,
I mean, that's what you hear, man.
well, I know in the depth of my heart,
Yeah.
um, I think the evidence is
Mm-hmm.
that you start to live in that, as described in our literature, the fourth dimension of existence. And I don't know, maybe somebody who, if someone listens to this, maybe they can let us know what they think about it. I've
Mm-hmm.
always defined that fourth dimension as the dimension of time, meaning that I can live in the now,
Yeah.
right? And later on, and right, all of this intermingled, may you find there's one who has all power, may you find him now, right? You can only find him in the now. So what's this have to do with spiritual awakening? If I live in that dimension of time where I can actually literally live in the now, that's I'm awakened. My spirit is awakened
Mm,
to the present.
yeah.
I'm no longer I'm no longer subjugated to the fears and terror I have of the future or the regret and resentment of the past,
Damn.
thereby missing my life as it goes forward. You see,
Yeah.
because in we agnostics, again, all interconnected, it says that we should regard ourselves as
Mm-hmm.
intelligent agents of this power. The creative power in the universe is ongoing. And the only way for us to be in communion with it, I'll use the word communion or
Yeah.
union, is to be in the now, you see, because it's only accessible to us. Maybe there's another dimension for other beings if there's other beings in the universe. For us as humans, it can
Mm-hmm.
only be experienced in the now. And therefore, we have to live in the now if we're to experience and to be creative agents of that power, meaning
Mm-hmm.
we're the tools of that nature, right? But I can't be a tool if I'm stuck in the past or fearful of the future, and my
Mm-hmm.
mind and my spirit and my soul are not grounded exactly where I am in the moment. And so that's when I'm awakened, because I can be abstinent of the drink or the drug and not be in the moment. Those are two different things, right?
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. And not to cut you off, like, but like if you could expand on that, how do you, because in our fellowship, like the time of sobriety is seen as like the only currency to judge somebody spiritual fitness. And like you said, it's not because abstinent of the drug or the drink that somebody is awakened. How do you explain that to somebody who is in the room and tell them, like, yes, that guy might have 36 years of sobriety but is not necessarily spiritually fit? How you explain that to somebody?
Well, there's some crude ways. One is there's a old phrase, how you living,
Yeah,
how you living. Okay.
yeah. Mhm.
Um, Listen, I respect time.
Yeah.
Okay. We have,
Mhm.
there's a respect for time, but you're right. In my view, time does not equate recovery. Um, if we read in the preface, right, AA member number 3 recovered when? Our own literature says immediately. You see, if this has always been about me entering a relationship with a power greater than myself, and then
Mhm.
growing in that relationship, not maintaining it, but growing in that relationship,
Mhm.
who is to say when or how long that power needs to act in the human heart? You see,
Nice.
right?
Nice.
There's no boundary that we can say, well, God can only make you recover in 6 months. Really? I thought he either is or he isn't. I thought he was either everything or he was nothing.
Yeah.
You see, if all things are possible, then all things are possible, meaning recovery immediately.
Yeah.
So it is a function of your spiritual fitness. You know, I try to avoid the discussion about recovered versus recovering,
Yeah.
I'll get into it a little bit here because I think it illustrates
Please
the
do.
point.
Please do. Yep.
All right, so we have a
Mhm.
threefold illness that we learn, right?
Yeah.
Mentally, physically, spiritually.
Yes.
Now, the power comes, removes the problem. The obsessive thought, the main problem is in the mind. The obsessive thought is removed. I don't think of the drink or the drug. Therefore, I don't ingest it. I don't ingest it. I don't go off to the races. I don't suffer physical craving. But all this is contingent on a very critical hinge, critical leg, my spiritual fitness. And
Yes.
how do we measure that? Well, we really don't measure that. My spiritual fitness is a function of now. My spiritual fitness is a function of this breath because you and I are having a wonderful conversation right now.
Mhm.
Now, in 10 minutes, not that I'm going to go downstairs and kick the dog. I'm not going to kick the dog, God forbid. But you see, if we're spiritual and we're levitating, and by the way, I know I certainly don't do this perfectly. I don't think anyone else does this perfectly. I don't want anyone to get the impression that somehow, we start demonstrating Jedi mind powers or anything. I'm not going to be levitating anytime soon, I don't think. So let's get that clear that my humanity involves all my imperfections as part of God's nature. By definition, I'm imperfect.
Mhm.
That is just that's how I was created. So to get that straight, but my spiritual fitness is a function of now. Right. So yes, we have these spiritual tools to help create some discipline, right? And when we read the 11-step instructions and the 10-step instructions, how we how we apply some that alcoholics need discipline. So we discipline ourselves how? By establishing spiritual practices when we wake up during the day to pause, how we review our day, right? These are
Mhm.
tools, right? But these are tools. If I get up and I have a great meditation and I have some prayers, I read something inspirational, and then I get in the car and I'm stuck in traffic and I'm giving the finger to everybody. Well, I might have been spiritually fit when I first got up, but I'm
Mhm.
certainly not demonstrating spiritual fitness in the moment.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to go out and drink that afternoon because I gave somebody the finger in traffic, and I'm saying that as a euphemism. I don't do that.
Yeah.
I'm just making a point. I don't want to think I'm one of these aggressive drivers, but the point is that that may not necessarily translate to, oh, I'm going to get drunk.
Yeah.
But if like the program tells us, if my behavior continues to harm others, and we think of a harm as something that you do physically to somebody, or
Mm.
from taking something away from somebody, but or maybe some form of abuse, emotional abuse, whatever it may be. But
Mhm.
to be a harmful person, not cognizant of the people around you, to do even a simple thing like littering, like you know, you know, there's certain as we get sober, the road gets narrower and narrower, right? We
Mhm.
start out on a broad highway, and then on page 58, suddenly you're on a path, right? And
Mhm.
so as you travel, the road gets narrower. And so our behaviors should be changing as we go because acceptable behavior that may have been acceptable early in recovery is no longer acceptable as I've
Yeah.
matured. So I don't want to give the tell have people could think, oh, geez,
Yeah.
My boss peed me off today and I was really angry and now I'm going to get drunk. No, but what I'm saying is that's why we have all these tools to help us get back on track, get back to a spiritual foundation where we can continue to live our life to guide us, right? What does it say? Just that the steps are guides,
Mm-hmm.
right? That keep us on a path that, that allow us to be part of the human race.
So, like, if I understood it correctly, and I'm going to try to resume what you just said, the importance is not to not get angry or not to do some, it's like basically to be self-aware of our actions. If we check with our own self and we aware that, like, to use your analogy with the road, that the moment we flip the road, the flip the finger, flip the road, sorry, flip the finger to that person while we're driving, when in the morning we did everything to stay spiritually fit. If we are aware of that moment and we try to recenter ourselves, we maintain that spiritual fitness, right?
Right, but you also have to make every effort to change your behavior, right? If I
Mm-hmm.
keep on giving people the bird as I'm driving down the road, or I keep on stealing, or I'm going to cheat on my spouse, if my behavior doesn't change, then I could say all the prayers I want. It's not being demonstrated in my actions.
Yeah,
It would be
through
my
that.
view. You
Yeah.
know,
So
uh,
go ahead.
you used the word awareness, and I just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to kind of zero in on that a little bit. There's a key word in our 10 step instructions.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people read right past it, and it's a simple word. It says watch. Watch for these things within ourselves, right? And that seems so benign. What? But watching is hard work because what that involves is being mindful of what we're doing and our
Mm-hmm.
intention, and that takes practice.
Yes,
Um,
it does.
and none of us does this perfectly, and we all have lapses of this and so forth. And there's a whole host of spiritual tools to mend fences, make amends, and to move forward. But it the think about, you mentioned, like, how do you know? And I talked about, you asked me, how do I know, if I've had this spiritual experience? And I talked about living in the now. I'm not moving from that point. But what we have to understand is, as human beings, that we're going to come up short. But this watching thing, you see, the reality is that there was a time where I lived strictly on instinct, and
Mm-hmm.
I was no more. I was really not far removed from an animal. Um, and my behavior was from one extreme to the other. I was emotionally unstable. I was, physically unstable in terms of the way I, you know, conducted myself. And I was not even aware of how insane I was.
Yeah.
Now, the blessing is we've been given spiritual tools. We've been awakened, essentially. We've been awoken from the dead. And
Mm-hmm.
now, as we go through our human experience and we fail and we have our failures, if I'm watching, at least I'm aware. I'm aware that maybe I was discourteous to you. I'm aware now, oh, you're going to steal something? You really going to try to take that?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this awareness that means that allows us to get back on track.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, again, being in the now. That's watching. That takes
Yeah.
discipline. That doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. I agree with you. So, like, a question that might be a little bit hard for you. So, do you think the 12 step are enough to be spiritually fit, or we need to add other stuff? Like, sorry, like we need to find something else within ourselves? Because you said earlier the steps are a guide, but are they enough to maintain our spiritual fitness?
I would. I think, as I shoot from the hip here, I think the answer is the ultimate answer is no.
Mm,
The What will maintain your spiritual fitness, what's key to your recovery, is your relationship with the power greater than yourself. As we read our program, even our literature says at
Mm-hmm.
the very end, I think it's on page 164, it talks about God will disclose more to you and to us. So your real reliance must always be on Him. You see,
Yeah.
the steps are a wonderful spiritual tool. We need that as our foundation.
Like
Again, without the integrity of the program, the language, you and I wouldn't even be able to have to start this conversation,
through
right?
that.
We'd all be talking in tongues, and nobody would know what anybody the hell is saying, and it'd all be gibberish,
Mm-hmm.
and you wouldn't attract anyone because if think of a newcomer walking in and everybody's speaking a different language and nobody understands each other, you'd say, "What the hell is this? This is crazy." Right? So we have this foundation for communicating that's critical. The tools are designed for living, and I apply those tools in my life to the best of my ability. But ultimately, my reliance is on Him, right? On He who has all power. Um,
Yeah.
and so to me, that transcends everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's there, there's a tongue in cheek thing that I will say, and I hope I don't offend anybody.
Go
And
ahead,
that
man.
is that after saying all that,
Mm-hmm.
then you throw away the book. No, we don't throw away the book. Because if you tell a
Mm-hmm.
newcomer to throw away the book, they're really, but I think there's a Buddhist, story about the monks crossing the river, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they make a raft, right, and they cross the river, and now they're going through the jungle, and then but one of the monks is still carrying the raft, and he's complaining, they're going through the jungle, the forest, and the ground is difficult walking, and they're going uphill, and the guy's getting agitated, he's carrying this raft with him. And the other monk says, I don't, we crossed the river miles ago. Why you
Yeah.
we've already passed that river. We're not going to need it. So I mean, I'm not trying to tell anyone to throw away the book. What I'm trying to say is that it's a tool that points to the answer. Let's we can be we could love our program, and
Mm-hmm.
I do. It has wrought miracles, not only in my life but in so many lives that I've been privileged to walk along with. But that it's not but it's the creative power in the universe that brings the miracle about. We have been so blessed to find a
Mm-hmm.
pathway to get in touch with that power and then to grow. I would never tell anybody throw away the book per se, because it's critical for me to carry this message. I mentioned this at the start, how vital
Yeah.
it is to carry the message, and how
Mm-hmm.
all of the people that I've had the privilege of working with have become my true teachers because they've helped me grow. And how would I have that opportunity to do that, to have that experience, if I didn't have the book as the foundation of our communication and to maintain the integrity of the message that has
Mm-hmm.
helped so many, at this point, I would say millions of people to a new way of life.
Yeah, it's beautifully said, and I really appreciate you being sincere because like what you just said might like upset some people like that, the steps might not be enough, that like it's actually your higher power, but like to circle back to something that you said earlier, like, how these steps are the foundation of our recovery. What happened in the fellowships? Why are people, so geared toward hanging around the fellowship and not wanting to start the true work? Like basically what, based on what you are saying, people out there hanging out, we're speaking all different language, but very few, unfortunately, want to sit down and learn this new language, this new foundation. Like the proof is most big books meeting as much smaller than like a regular meeting. What do you think is that now?
All right. Well, I'm going to sidestep your question in
Okay.
some way,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, because it's not my place to comment on the culture of the 12-step fellowships, and I'll expand on that point.
Okay, go
I'll
ahead.
let let's start out when I walked in the rooms.
Mm-hmm.
When I walked in the rooms, I didn't take a survey. Oh, you a big book guy? Oh, you a meeting maker? Oh, you hug the
Mm-hmm.
coffee pot? I was just so grateful that
Yeah.
there was a place that I was welcome to.
Mm-hmm.
See, all of us together, all of us are the living legacy of our fellowship. It's a human organization.
Yeah.
We're not going to conform to a single, I'll call it individual vision.
True.
Um, Now, what motivates a human being from one person to the next? It's not for anyone. I don't have that vision.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there could be some things that might be. One thing is that, at least from my experience, I walked in, I was ignorant of the nature of the illness.
Oh.
Now, I mentioned right off the bat that, uh, for all I know, people were carrying the message. I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it not because they weren't saying it. I was hearing it because I was stuck in me. Um, but no doubt I was ignorant about the nature of illness, and that's why I encourage everyone to find out their own truth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so how do I build on that concept? So the fact that ignorance abounds, and as addicts and alcoholics, I know how to fit in. Let me tell you, we all can find a spot, right? You can drop ship me in the middle of middle America somewhere, and I'm gonna find a spot, and I'm gonna blend in. So if I drop somebody drops me in the middle of a 12-step fellowship right out of rehab, whether it be my first rehab or 100th rehab, probably worse for the guy with 100 because now he knows, he thinks he knows,
Yeah.
right? But you come in, and what do we do? Everybody raises their hand. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an addict. I'm John Doe. I'm an alcoholic. You see the coffee, you see the cookies. Maybe there's a pretty girl you can sit next to, and I'm going to fit right in. And if it means I'm going to say, my name is Luis and I'm an alcoholic, that's what I'm going to say because I'm going to fit in. I'm going to find a way to fit in. Now, I have no idea what this says to be, say, an alcoholic, but everybody else says an alcoholic. So I just repeat what I hear because that's what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of us who've had the experience, we have the responsibility, emphasize, to
Okay.
carry what? It says in this message, to
Yeah.
carry
Just.
the message. That's my responsibility. And at every opportunity, I will carry this message in a way I hope that people can connect to, that people would be attracted to, rather than you must do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you see, lack of power is still my dilemma.
Yeah.
I am not in the results business.
Yes.
My responsibility is to carry the message.
Yeah.
Best is my ability, best as God allows me to.
Yeah.
What
Um.
the result of that is out of my hands.
Mm-hmm.
You see, whether the message is received, whether someone gets encouraged or inspired, or at least inquisitive enough to say, um, hey, what do you mean by that? You see, I talked about meeting my sponsor. You know what made me
Mm-hmm.
go up to him after the meeting, after he shared.
Oh.
He was a speaker. He introduced himself, and um uh, he says, I'm Eric. His name was Eric,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a recovered alcoholic. And recovered. Now, that maybe people had said that a billion times and I never heard it, but that's the first time anybody said recovered. So I went to him after the meeting. Hey, when you say recovered, what do you mean by that? You mean recovering? You're slowly recovering? No, he goes, I'm recovered. You see, so I said, well, what do you mean by that? And that's how the conversation started that led to us doing the work together. So
Mm-hmm.
he said something that struck me, that inspired me to. Now I don't remember anything that he shared about his story, whether I identified with it or anything like that. But once he said recovered, just when he introduced himself, in my soul, I heard something different that I at least I thought I'd never heard before. At least I was the cognate of hearing it before. So, our responsibility is to carry the message. We're
Mm-hmm.
not in the results business. I will
Yes.
continue to carry the message as long as God gives me breath in my lungs to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then how everybody journeys, see, because we all have to journey. Our own journeys are unique,
Mm-hmm.
and they're sacred. And that person that who maybe not ready to hear the message right then and there,
Mm-hmm.
there may be another time when he hears the message. You see, we don't know. And so the culture of AA or the 12-step fellowship, I think it's not my say to be concerned vis-a-vis, oh, these people, they rather go to the beginners meeting, they rather, they want to talk about their day or their problems or their goldfish died, and I'm making fun. I mean,
Yeah.
tongue in cheek. That's not for me to say, because I know when I walked in, you could have been talking about your goldfish dying, and I would have been, I was just grateful that I was somewhere.
Yeah.
And,
I totally understand that, and that's very interesting because when you talk about going to our sponsor, I'm gonna be tell you basically how I see you, how I'm you being perceived by me. I believe in people's aura and energy, and when you walk in the room and you talk about this program, you have a when they say it's a program of attraction, no promotion, you definitely have an attractive aura. Like I never seen you like sponsor hunting, like like people gravitate normally toward you because you know I believe that they can feel that you spiritually fit, right? That you living your program, that you are free. And my question now is for somebody who completed the steps, who had that spiritual awakening, what are the next steps in order to sponsor somebody? Because my concern is I would like to sponsor, eventually sponsor, but I don't want to hurt. I don't, sorry for the lack of better word, but I don't want to be self-seeking in wanting to help somebody else at all costs, because now the step after is to spread the message. But um yeah, how do you get the right attitude when you want to sponsor somebody?
all right. I have an answer for you. It comes from our program.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know you used the word hunting.
Yeah.
Um, you know, First of all, I never use the term. I'm going to get to the point. I never
Mm-hmm.
use the term sponsor. I always use the term working with others.
Okay.
And what I emphasize to people that I've worked with is that we are working together. See, you and I right now, and anybody listening,
Mm-hmm.
we're equally powerless in this moment.
Yes.
You see, so I don't, this is not Amway, right? Okay, I don't sell you a box of soap and then you sell to somebody else a box of soap, and then like everybody's kicking up royalties to me. No,
Yeah.
no, no, no. We are equally powerless. So I'm just as powerless today as I was before I came into these rooms.
Mm-hmm.
In that respect, nothing's changed. And my program, the program tells us what? That that strenuous work with another alcoholic is vital to permanent recovery. Vital. When we read A Vision for You and you hear the story of Bill and Bob, they when Bob when Bob gets the light bulb and he has that moment, right? What did him and Bill was? They called the hospital and explain, and they talked to the nurse, and what did they do? They explained their need. See, they needed to work with another alcoholic, not because they were altruistic and they want to do do good for mankind. Yes, that's a byproduct,
Mm-hmm.
but at the core of the experience, I need it for my recovery, just like I need to work a fourth step, just like I need to do, uh, you know, I need to watch during the day, just like I have to do a daily inventory at the end of the day. These are things that are vital to my recovery. And what works when all other measures fail? And all other measures fail. All other measures mean, praying, going to meetings, doing, meditating, levitating 10 feet above the ground. All of those other things, all working
Yeah.
with others when all other measures fail, work with another alcoholic. You see, that is vital. What does it tell? If I fail to perfect and enlarge my spiritual life through what? Through self-sacrifice and work for others, I will not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. I'm quoting our literature for a reason. Because that gives me what? A sense of urgency. I still have the desperation of a drowning man.
Mm-hmm.
See, I need that spot. I need that person to work with more than he needs me. So hunted, I know you use that term and it's got a negative connotation, but you
Yes.
have to understand if you've just completed your steps, if you're going to grow and continue in this experience, you need to work with another alcoholic. There's just no other way around it. And so you see, you see this all the time. Here's a commentary.
Yes. Go ahead.
John Doe just got out of rehab, shows up at the meeting. Everybody claps. Hooray. He gets the hug. He gets the white chip. Oh, everybody loves him. We start passing the meeting list around, and everybody signs their name and gives them their phone number. And now the meeting's over. He's got a freaking thing, a book, a meeting list, and 100 phone numbers that what? He will never call.
Yeah.
See, what you do, what I was taught, what was done with me, is you go up to John Doe, first say, introduce yourself, and ask him if you can have his phone number. And you
Mm-hmm.
call him and share your experience, strength, and hope. And then offer him a solution if he cares to have it. And why? Not because you're hunting, brother,
Mm-hmm.
because you need that guy more than he needs you. And even if he doesn't work with you, even if you start the work and he balks,
Mm-hmm.
you have made the effort. You've been responsible in carrying the message. You're doing your part, you see. And so I would encourage you.
Yes.
It's not like you're collecting trophy wives. For those of us who are in my age group will understand what I mean. Okay. Okay. This is not a collection of books that you're going to show, come to my library, look at my collection of rare books. No, this is something that you need to do for your own recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need, yeah, go hunt them down. You don't have to be browbeating them. You don't have to chain yourself to their car. But, but that guy who maybe you hear somebody share, you know, who's back, one day back again, who's desperate, who's bewildered, who has every, doesn't understand, he doesn't have a clue why he keeps on using, because he wants to stop after all. He
Yeah.
knows he's an alcoholic after all. He chose not to do it anymore after all. And yet here he is, one day back again. Well, maybe what needs to happen is, and I'll put you in the story. Benny needs to go to that guy after the meeting and say, listen, let me get your number. I have, there's a solution to your problem. You never have to suffer again. I was just as hopeless and desperate as you, and there is a way out. Can I call you tomorrow? What's a good time to call you tomorrow? We could talk about it.
Yeah. Oh man, that's beautifully said, bro. No man, I'm so happy to have you as a guest, and like we're reaching the end of this interview. It's almost an hour and a half, so like
Wow.
long one, yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna give you the last word, and you can ask me a question, or you can, ideally, I don't know, what would you say to like the newcomers in the room? Like end it like you will basically. What would you like to say last?
Well, first off, thank you for having me an hour and a half. My goodness. I take a lunch break while you're listening, I guess. What I would say to anyone who's come in desperate need of a way out, to
Mm-hmm.
to know that there is a solution. and that it's, it's not, we've all been there. It's not just the special ones that get it, quote unquote. We are all equally powerless, and God's love for us is infinite, and He loves us infinitely, which means what? He loves us all equally.
Mhm.
And there is a solution. You never, ever have to suffer again, not just from the drink or the drug, but from even the thought of the drink of the drug. That there's real freedom to be found here in our fellowship, in our program, um, and you never have to suffer again.
All right. Thank you very much, Luis. This was
Thank you.
amazing. And I will see you guys for the conclusion. Bye. There you have it, folks. What a fantastic episode. I just feel like I had a conversation with Yoda right now. Speaking of Jedi, Force and mind tricks. Uh, yeah, like thank you very much to Luis for being a wonderful guest in this episode. An hour 20 minutes about, and like he said, like I would recommend that you take a lunch break. There's so much to unpack from that interview, and what a great way to get back on on tracks with Stairway to Redemption and give you like a episode that's twice as long. Yeah, guys, as always, support us on social media and Patreon, and I will see you guys in 2 weeks, hopefully. Bye.